What does it mean to be a successful public transit agency? What are you doing to lead the way? It's time to learn from the top transit professionals from around the world. This is Transit Unplugged with your host, Paul Comfort.
Welcome to Transit Unplugged. I'm your host, Paul Comfort. And today we continue our travels around the world to Saudi Arabia. And I'm excited to have with us as our guest, Naif Bin Hwail, who's Executive General Manager at the Transport General Authority of Saudi Arabia. Naif, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Paul. I'm so happy to be with you.
Great. Where are we talking to you at today? Are you in Riyadh?
I am in Riyadh. Yes, correct.
Very good. And that's your capital, right?
It is, yes. Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia.
Very
It's
good.
the center of the kingdom. And it's the largest city in the kingdom.
Very good. Can you tell us some about population and give us just a general context for people who may not be familiar with Saudi Arabia itself, where it sits and all that kind of stuff?
We have 35 million population. We have 13 districts around the kingdom. We have Mecca and Medina, the holy mosques in the kingdom. We're in the middle of three continentals. So we have a strategic location as a kingdom that we want to leverage on. Later on, we'll elaborate.
Very good.
Our youth is there 70% of the population are under 35 years.
Wow.
So we have an ambitious plans to capitalize as well on developing human capital for all the vision objectives.
Very good. And you are part of the national government, right? In your role there as General Manager of the Transport General Authority?
Correct. I am the Executive General Manager for Safety and Service in Transport General Authority, which regulates and supervises the transportation means in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Very good. And the overall department has three different sectors, right? Tell us about those sectors, and then we'll dig into a little bit in your sector on the land transport.
No issue. TGA has three main sectors that TGA regulates: land transport, railway transport, and maritime transport. Mainly, we focus on moving goods and people. So this is the main mandate across all sectors.
Very good. And tell us some about your division, the land transport division.
Land transport has been a challenge since the beginning. TGA is a young entity, if we can say. It's 40 years old, and there are many modes of transport and land transport. There are trucks, buses, small cars that carries taxis, rent-a-car. So we have under our radar around 21 modes that needs to be regulated from day one. And then the journey started, and we know that there are a lot of people, needs to be a lot of service providers that we need to regulate their operations, their service of quality, their standards of vehicles that they use. We need to ensure a good active relationship between investors and the government authority. So that ended up with a set of platforms that all the investors can use to renew their licenses, to register new cars, remove cars from the surface, and also rely on when they need to read or see the regulations, the new regulations and announcements. We believe that not only enforcements that will add value, but awareness and education side by side with the investors will add more value.
That's good. So a lot of your responsibility is in regulating a lot of private operators that have different types of transportation in the kingdom.
Correct. It was not structured as one big operator that will operate concessions or regions. However, now we're moving toward big operators, big companies. We're structuring the infrastructure that helps introduce new technologies and all the e-cars and autonomous cars that can be introduced to the operation.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes. Is that part of, I know that you all have a 2030 vision. Do you want to tell us some about that and how this all kind of rolls together into that?
Correct. 2030 vision is everybody's objective. It's not the government only. It's me as a government party and me as a citizen of the country. We all have to wear this hat and proceed toward the objectives. TGA has many initiatives and projects that contributes in the vision, and we have accomplished many of them in 2020. We, in general, want to upgrade transportation service in the various cities in the kingdom, in addition to contributing to develop the movements of economy and nationalized industry, and also attract local and international investors in the transport industry. Main objectives that TGA orbit around is making KSA a global logistic hub and raising and promoting the quality of life, which we contribute in introducing a new technology and smoothness operation done by the service providers.
Very good. Tell us some about, so you're regulating them, but you also are involved in helping to oversee some construction of some things, right? On bus and metro and et cetera. Tell us anything you can about that, what you're actually moving forward with in the mass transit world.
Paul, we know the trend is going towards smart mobility. And our roadmap is, yes, we supervise and regulate and supervise the current modes. However, we're welcoming and introducing new technology to have a bundle of new technologies and like Uber and Careem and autonomous cars, e-cars. So we're conducting many studies throughout the globe to find the new technology and introduce it to the market. One of the things that we also looking at is ensuring competition between competitors.
Okay.
So we have to be keen and careful that when we introduce any service that all investors and other services not get impacted.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's good. And you tell us a little bit about when you and I were talking recently about you have a high-speed rail, some there between, I think it was Mecca and Medina maybe, and just give us some of the infrastructure that's already in place there.
Okay, this is a very interesting part. When we say we want to be a logistic hub, a global logistic hub, we mean this because we already have Mecca and Medina is the destination of around 1.7 Muslims around the globe. We have to have all the easy access to Mecca and Medina. So we use trains, buses during these seasons. Nevertheless, the location of Saudi Arabia is a strategic location. Let's say it connects Asia to Africa and Europe, and we want to capitalize on this location. So we're building railways between the east and west of Saudi Arabia that will carry goods faster than ever. We're connecting GCC with the contribution of all GCC countries, of course. We're connecting Mecca and Medina with a high-speed railway that you mentioned. That makes the journey of all the easier and smoother. So we have so many initiatives that also contribute in being a logistic hub, in unbanning all the bans, truck bans in the big cities. The traffic jam sometimes causes the traffic police to stop big trucks and big cars to enter the big cities. We're working side by side with our colleagues to easy the access to big cities to smooth the transportation around the hour.
Very good. It sounds like you are working as well on. So you've got Riyadh. What are the other kind of big cities? Mecca and Medina are your holy sites. Are there other big cities that you're working on connecting logistically and also with mass transportation?
Of course, we have Dammam in the east side of the kingdom. We also have Jeddah in the west side of the kingdom.
Very good. I also think it's interesting how many kind of private cars, taxis, and Ubers you have operating there. Tell us about that and your role in overseeing them. And that's a major part of what you're doing, I'm sure.
Paul, we're one of the leading countries in e-hailing services. We have around 800,000 cars on surface, and we also control them by technology. So we ensure the entry of the driver and the car is up to the standards and up to the security level that we requires to make sure all the passengers are on a good hand or with a good hand. So, but we also introduced the monitoring screens that we monitor the operations for e-hailing by making sure all the hotspot zones are getting the needed service per demand,
okay,
and also directing them to, let's say, a sudden season or sudden demand that we notice during any interval of the day.
Yeah, I think that's great. I've seen that in some other countries too, where you don't have taxi cabs just going around without knowledge of what's happening, but you're helping to guide them, saying, we've got a big event over here. You should move a lot of your vehicles over there. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. This is this called e-hailing in transport. Instead of going to the street trying to stop a taxi, now you probably know where you can by your smartphone, ask for the service you want.
That's great. Where parts of the Western world are getting into that, actually being operated by public transit agencies, are calling it microtransit, where they can send, and it's not just one person at a time. Sometimes it's shared rides. Are you all doing some of the shared rides where it's not just one person at a time?
It is allowed. It is allowed by law. However, the behavior of passengers from country to country.
Right.
We don't want to impose services that not adequate to a service or a value chain.
Understood.
However, we welcome everything. We put everything on surface so people can try it. And what really important to mention is that we're doing this sharing ride by buses. The metros and almost to launch in Riyadh. The bus sharing concept will help moving people near to the railway stations. This is a part of a master plan integrated services. So where bus and taxis and railways and metros are all connected, we make it so efficient to the service.
That integrated transportation, pulling it all together is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before, I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about your background and then end the show talking about maybe the future, where you're at on things like, if you can talk about it, Hyperloop, vertical takeoff and landing, those kind of things that always get people excited, autonomous vehicles. But tell us just a little bit more about the bus infrastructure and the rail infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. Does the government run buses, or it's just private contractors that do it? And give us a lay of the land there.
At TGA, we only regulate the services. We don't operate. We have service providers from the private sectors that work on the licenses services.
Right.
On bus routes, we have a very successful story in Riyadh where we revamped the service 2 years ago from old vehicles, unlicensed, to a new brand, new vehicles that operates in state. We also have new BRT in Riyadh that is in the pilot phase as we speak, that goes around all the streets that are main streets in Riyadh.
Very good. So your BRT in place?
Come again, Paul?
So you have a bus rapid transit system there in place in Riyadh?
Yes.
Very good.
And we have another two in Jeddah and Dammam, and they're planning.
We'll continue with Paul's interview with Mr. Naif Bin Hwail in just a second. But first, let's talk about what's coming up next week on Transit Unplugged. Hi, I'm Tris Hussey. I'm the producer here behind the scenes at Transit Unplugged. Next week, Paul interviews Stuart Mader of Vax Transit, and they talk about everything the transit industry has done to help get the country vaccinated. But the conversation doesn't stop there. Here's a little snippet of where the conversation went.
And what do you see as the future of the health of the commuter train industry?
I think you bring up some great points, Paul, and I think that the future for the industry really looks a lot different than it did in 2019, when in many ways the focus was around, particularly for commuter rail and commuter bus, the 9 to 5 peaks, the peak of the peak. Jam-packed trains and buses, the local news calling it sardine cans. I think those days are gone, at least for the foreseeable future. And I think there's some big opportunities that creates for transit agencies. And for example, what you just mentioned about, do we call it commuter rail anymore? I think arguably it's time to switch. It's been time to switch to regional rail, because what that signals to people is that it's not just a service to go in and out Monday through Friday. And when you think about it, that provides better value to the customer.
And never one to shy away from a little controversy. Stewart and Paul start talking about masks on public transit. You're really going to want to hear where that conversation goes. And now, let's get back to the interview.
Okay, very good. And so we're recording this in early June. And so where is the kingdom now in responding to COVID, and how has that impacted your ridership, and where is ridership now on your services?
It was a crazy year, Paul. We almost have a complete shutdown during the lockdown. However, we made sure that goods are still getting to the main place. We maneuver a lot of regulations and bend a lot of things to make sure everybody is contributing to overcome this pandemic. We're happy that from what we accomplished, we did not experience any shortage in supply due to the contribution of all vehicles in transporting goods. Still, technology, again, we say technology is a main asset in our setup. So without technology, we could have lose many of our success today.
And on the public transportation side, has ridership started to come back up now that we're through the worst of it, hopefully, of the pandemic?
Yes, we starting from June 2020, we noticed the ridership picked up again from 0 to an acceptable level. Still, bus riders there was some limitations in the capacity, where people has to be buses has to be operate with 50% of capacity.
Right.
So that impacted the ridership of bus. However, now it's back to normal.
Okay.
Everything is operating fine.
That's good. So let's go back a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself, Naif, and your background and how long you've been in this position, those kinds of things.
I'm also new in this industry, but I've come from a telecom background.
Okay.
And I see the contribution of my experience is a great contribution, as I'm familiar with all the technology needed to be inserted in the operation.
That's great. Of course,
I have 20 years of experience.
20 years?
Yes.
That's great. And you had a double major in college?
Yes, I do. I have majoring in MIS and business development.
I think that's a perfect background for what you're doing right now, because as you said, public transportation really now is it's less about the equipment, the buses themselves, and it's really more about the technology, isn't it? Like how we're going into the future.
Correct, Paul, correct. The added value that we've seen, or let's say one of the things that we're proud of today is the easiness of interacting with our service providers, because service providers are the main asset in the whole operation we do in Saudi Arabia. So we have created 10 platforms throughout our journey that resulted 11 billion transactions since the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. We have 193 services on those platforms. Our e-hailing companies has done more than 300 million trips. So we moved a lot, like 25 million people throughout 3 years through buses. And this is an accomplishment. And I said ridership in buses is a challenge because the mindset of people is not toward public transportation.
Right.
So we have, from day one, we had to change the mindset, try to promote the service as beautiful as it is. And we're getting there. Jumping from 0 to 10% in ridership and public transportation is very hard. But when you get to 10%, it gets easier.
Yes, a tipping point where you start moving forward. Yeah. Let's talk about the future in our last few minutes together, Naif. You mentioned autonomous vehicles being tested there in the kingdom. I'm also interested, maybe tell us whatever you can about that, but also anything you can tell us about your movements in some of the more futuristic things that are becoming more science than fiction now, which are things like Hyperloop or vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. Anything you can tell us about what you're doing in those areas?
Let me just say something, Paul. Yes, to be the future is important, but we're not going blindly. We're going strategically to the future. We're behind all the high-end technology, and from your platform now, I'm inviting everybody to invest in a green field in Saudi Arabia, where we're looking for all the surfaces that can contribute in the transportation setup.
That's great.
We have a goal to apply high-end Class A technology and standards, and we are going to introduce or make a strong governance across all sectors. And we have a set of or a bundle of projects that will help us to gain this. As I mentioned, we encourage and welcome all ideas in technology, including Hyperloop, e-cars, autonomous. We've conducted so many studies on autonomous cars and e-cars mainly to make sure that we're contributing to an efficient environment and efficient cost. And also, we have a mainstream or a main pillar that we're developing a human capital, because we believe in people comes before anything else. We believe that investing in human capital comes before investing in anything. People comes before strategy, comes before processes, comes before technology. So we created in 2020, we have initiated a Saudi Logistic Academy. Through that, we need to invest in our people, and we want to also have a reliable layer of professional operation guys that will help us on the ground to apply high standards and high tech, whatever we are going to introduce. But without people, we're not going to do anything.
That's great. I totally agree with that personally and support that, and always have felt like we need to put our people first. That comes before anything else. So I'm really happy to hear you say that. Where do you think, as you look ahead over the next 5 years, final question, where do you see a public transportation going in Saudi Arabia? What's your vision and where you see it in 5 years? What do you hope to have accomplished?
I see Saudi Arabia mainly, let's say we can see metros moving people. I think we're going to have, or I believe that we're going to have people ridership increases a lot in all the sectors and means. I think that we are going to see Hyperloop. I think we are going to see trains connected GCC countries. People can travel. I think we can see goods coming from Asia getting to Europe in much less time.
Very good. That's a great vision. Thank you so much for being with us today. Naif, Executive General Manager at Transport General Authority in Saudi Arabia. I think you've shown us how the kingdom is moving forward in mass transportation, public transportation, putting people first, and then investing in the technology that's necessary to take us into the future. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you, Paul. And I would love to, again, invite you to come and see with your own eyes where we are later on.
I'd love to do that. Hopefully we can take you up on that in the next year. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Transit Unplugged, powered by Trapeze Group. To stay up to date with all the new episodes, you can get updates via email or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at transitunplugged.com. And thanks for listening.